The red warning lights flashed across the command center of the Galactic Council. Ambassador Zixthara stared at the holographic display showing 17 star systems marked in black. Each black mark meant the same thing: another world lost to the Vorthak Empire. The Vorthak were not like other enemies the galaxy had faced before. They were machines, but not simple robots. They learned from every battle. Every tactic used against them became useless after the first try. Their ships grew stronger with each fight. Their weapons became deadlier with each encounter. Zixthara's forearms trembled as she read the latest report. The Kepler Defense Fleet had tried a new formation attack. It worked for exactly 12 minutes before the Vorthak adapted and destroyed every ship. 3 million beings died in those 12 minutes. "We need new ideas," said General Thax of the Zenthari Empire. His logical mind had already calculated their chances of victory. The numbers were not good. "Our conventional tactics fail every time. Honor demands we keep fighting," growled Commander Kelthon of the Cephalite warriors. His people valued bravery above all else. But even the bravest warriors could not win against an enemy that learned faster than they could adapt. The ethereal representative, a floating being of pure energy named Luminous, spoke without words. Its thoughts entered everyone's mind at once. "The psychic networks show only darkness ahead. The Vorthak will consume everything unless we find a new way." Zixthara touched the control panel with one of her long fingers. A new file appeared on the display. The words "Earth Human Species" appeared at the top. "There is one option we have not considered," she said slowly. "The humans?" The room fell silent. Humans were barely known in galactic society. They had only been discovered 50 years ago when they sent their first radio signals into space. Their technology was primitive compared to other species. Their ships could barely travel between their own planets. The humans? General Thax raised one eyebrow. "They are a minor species. They have no real weapons. Their ships are slow and weak." "Yes," Zixthara agreed. "But look at their history." The display changed to show human military records. Battle after battle appeared on screen. Humans fighting other humans across their single planet for thousands of years. The images were disturbing. Humans using fire as a weapon. Humans hiding in mud and snow to attack enemies. Humans destroying their own cities to stop invaders. "They fight differently than us," Zixthara explained. "They do not follow the normal rules of warfare. They use tricks and lies. They attack from unexpected directions. They never give up even when they should." Commander Kelthon snorted with disgust. "That is not honorable combat. That is not how civilized beings fight wars." "The Vorthak are not civilized beings," Zixthara reminded him. "Perhaps we need uncivilized tactics to defeat them." Luminous floated closer to the display. Its energy field pulsed with concern. "The human minds are strange. They think in ways that do not make sense. They choose pain when they could choose comfort. They fight when they should surrender." "Exactly," said Zixthara. "That strangeness might be what we need." General Thax studied the human records more carefully. He saw patterns that troubled his logical mind. Humans seemed to enjoy making their enemies afraid. They created weapons designed not just to kill but to terrify. They told stories about their battles to make themselves seem more dangerous than they really were. "Their psychological warfare techniques are unusual," he admitted. "But they are still primitive. Their weapons are chemical explosives and metal projectiles. They cannot seriously help against Vorthak technology." "Maybe their weapons are primitive," Zixthara said. "But their ideas might not be." She opened another file. This one showed human tactical manuals. Page after page of strategies that seemed insane to galactic military minds. Humans wrote about pretending to retreat to draw enemies into traps. They planned attacks that would hurt themselves just to hurt enemies more. They had detailed guides on how to fight when outnumbered, outgunned, and completely surrounded. "They have been fighting impossible battles for their entire history," Zixthara continued. "And somehow they keep winning. Not because they are stronger, but because they refuse to accept that they should lose." The debate continued for hours. The Zenthari wanted logical, tested strategies. The Cephalites wanted honorable combat. The Ethereals wanted peaceful solutions. But none of their preferences had worked against the Vorthak. Finally, General Thax made the decision. "We will invite them to join the Terran Defense Force, but only as support troops. They can guard supply lines and transport equipment. We will not risk putting them in real combat." Zixthara nodded. She already knew the humans would want more than a support role, but getting them involved was the first step. The communication was sent to Earth 3 days later. Captain Sarah Chen received the message at the United Earth Defense Headquarters. She read it twice before calling her staff into the briefing room. "The Galactic Council wants our help with a war," she announced. "They are fighting machines called the Vorthak. The enemy learns from every battle and adapts to every tactic." Colonel Marcus Rodriguez leaned forward in his chair. "What kind of help do they want?" "Support roles. Supply protection. Transport duties." Chen paused. "They think we are too primitive for real combat." The room erupted in angry voices. Human military officers did not like being told they were not good enough to fight, but Chen raised her hand for silence. "I am going to accept their invitation," she said, "but with conditions." She opened her communication link to the Galactic Council. Ambassador Zixthara appeared on the screen, her alien features showing hope and desperation. "We are honored by your invitation," Chen said formally. "Humanity will join the Terran Defense Force, but we require operational independence for human forces. We will coordinate with other species, but we choose our own tactics and targets." Zixthara's expression showed surprise. She had expected the humans to be grateful for any role in the war. "Your species is new to galactic warfare. Perhaps it would be better to follow established protocols." "Our species has been fighting wars since before we discovered fire," Chen replied firmly. "We know what we are doing. If you want our help, you get it our way." The debate among the galactic leaders was brief. They needed every advantage they could get. If giving the humans independence made them fight harder, it was worth the risk. "How much damage could one primitive species really cause?" "Agreed," Zixthara said finally. "Human forces will have operational autonomy within the overall mission structure." Chen smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "Excellent. We will begin preparations immediately. You will not regret this decision." But as the communication ended, Chen wondered if that was really true. Humans had a talent for making their enemies regret fighting them. Sometimes their allies regretted it too. The message went out across Earth within hours. Volunteers flooded the recruitment centers. Humanity was going to war among the stars. They would show the galaxy what humans could do when they really tried. What the galaxy did not understand yet was that humans had never really tried before. All their previous wars had been against other humans who thought like humans. This would be different. This time they were fighting to prove themselves to beings who thought they were weak. Humans did not like being underestimated. The combined fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Hadrian system. Colonel Marcus Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the human flagship, watching the massive alien warships take their positions. The ships were beautiful in their own way. Smooth curves and glowing energy fields marked the Zenthari vessels. Angular blade-like designs showed where the Cephalite warriors waited for battle. The ethereal ships looked like floating crystals that bent light around themselves. The human ships looked like ugly metal boxes next to them. No fancy curves or energy fields, just steel plates welded together around nuclear reactors and missile tubes. The aliens had already made jokes about human engineering. They called the ships flying scrapyards when they thought the humans could not hear. Rodriguez did not care about the jokes. Human ships were built to do a job, not to look pretty. And today they would do their job very well. Admiral Corvin of the Zenthari fleet opened communications to all ships. His logical voice filled every bridge in the fleet. Vorthak forces have established a defensive perimeter around the third planet. We will advance in formation Delta 7. Heavy cruisers will engage their main battleships. Destroyers will target support vessels. All units will maintain position and follow standard engagement protocols. Rodriguez looked at the tactical display. The Vorthak had 19 ships arranged in a perfect defensive grid. Their positions made sense from a logical standpoint. They could cover each other and focus fire on any attacking force. It was exactly the kind of setup that had destroyed every previous galactic fleet. Standard engagement protocols, Rodriguez muttered to his communications officer, just like every other battle they have lost. The human ships had been assigned to the rear of the formation. Admiral Corvin wanted them to protect the supply ships and transport vessels. Safe work for the primitive humans who could not handle real combat. Rodriguez activated his private communication channel to the other human ship captains. All Terran vessels, this is Rodriguez. You heard the plan. We are supposed to sit in the back and watch while our allies get themselves killed using the same tactics that have failed for 6 months. Captain Elena Vasquez of the destroyer Madrid responded first. Orders, sir? We are going to follow orders. Rodriguez said with a grin that his crew had learned to fear. "We are going to protect the supply lines. Just not the way they expect." The main fleet began its advance. Rodriguez watched the alien ships move forward in perfect formation. Every ship in exactly the right position. Every movement planned and coordinated. It was beautiful to watch. It was also completely predictable. The Vorthak opened fire first. Their weapons had been adapted from previous battles. Energy beams that could punch through Xanthari shields, kinetic projectiles that could crack Cephalite armor, psychic disruptors that confused ethereal navigation systems. They had learned well from past encounters. The Galactic fleet returned fire. Their weapons were powerful and accurate. Several Vorthak ships took damage, but within minutes the enemy began adapting. Their shields shifted frequency to deflect energy beams. Their armor reconfigured to absorb kinetic impacts. Their computers started filtering out psychic attacks. "Beginning phase 2 of our mission," Rodriguez announced to his ships. "Remember, we are protecting supply lines. All supply lines in this system." The human ships broke formation. Instead of staying safely in the rear, they scattered in different directions. Their movements looked random and chaotic to the alien commanders watching from their bridges. Captain Chen of the cruiser Beijing took her ship toward the asteroid field on the system's edge. Captain Okonkwo of the frigate Lagos headed for the gas giant's moon system. Captain Singh of the destroyer Mumbai aimed for the debris field left over from an ancient battle. "What are they doing?" Admiral Corvin demanded over the communication channel. "Human vessels returned to formation immediately." Rodriguez ignored the order. He was too busy studying the tactical display. The Vorthak had supply ships of their own hiding behind the main fleet. Cargo vessels carrying ammunition and replacement parts. Communication relay ships coordinating the defense. Support vessels that kept the main battleships fighting. "All human vessels, target package identified," Rodriguez announced. "Supply lines are now under threat. We are moving to protect them." The human ships struck from 6 different directions at once. They did not attack the main Vorthak battleships. They ignored the heavily armed destroyers. Instead, they went after targets that no civilized species would consider legitimate. Captain Chen's Beijing launched nuclear missiles at the Vorthak communication relays, not to destroy them cleanly, but to fill the space around them with radioactive debris that would interfere with signals for hours. Captain Okonkwo's Lagos fired kinetic projectiles at ammunition supply ships. When the ships exploded, the blast took out 2 nearby support vessels that had been positioned too close together. Captain Singh's Mumbai did something that horrified the watching aliens. She rammed her destroyer directly into a Vorthak fuel depot. The explosion was visible from the other side of the system. The Vorthak formation began to fall apart. Their adaptive systems had been designed to handle direct military threats. They had no protocols for dealing with enemies who attacked support infrastructure. Their main battleships suddenly found themselves running low on ammunition and unable to communicate with each other. "Human vessels, what are you doing?" Admiral Corvin's voice was filled with shock. "You are engaging in indiscriminate warfare. There are rules about targeting non-combatant vessels," Rodriguez finally responded. Colonel Rodriguez to Admiral Corvin. All targeted vessels were supporting enemy combat operations. Therefore, they were legitimate military targets. "We are simply protecting supply lines more efficiently than expected." The battle turned quickly after that. Without their support network, the Vorthak main fleet could not maintain their defensive positions. Their adaptive technology needed constant communication with central processors to function properly. Cut off from their network, the ships began making tactical errors. The Galactic fleet pressed their advantage. Xanthari logic computers calculated new firing solutions while Vorthak systems struggled to adapt without guidance. Cephalite warriors charged enemy positions that had lost their coordination. Ethereal psychic attacks overwhelmed Vorthak defenses that could no longer filter them properly. Within 2 hours, the Vorthak fleet was in full retreat. 17 enemy ships fled the system, leaving behind debris and disabled vessels. The alien commanders were stunned. They had won a decisive victory for the first time in months, but they were not celebrating. Instead, they were staring at their sensor readings in disbelief. "The humans destroyed non-combatant vessels," Admiral Corvin said slowly. "They targeted supply ships and communication relays. They used ramming attacks and nuclear weapons without warning." Commander Kelthon of the Cephalites was equally disturbed. "There is no honor in such tactics. Civilized warriors do not attack support personnel." Luminous of the ethereals projected its thoughts to the other commanders. The human minds during combat were different. They felt no guilt about their targets. They planned these attacks before the battle began. Rodriguez appeared on the communication screen. His face showed satisfaction, not shame. Mission accomplished, Admiral. Supply lines have been secured. Enemy fleet has been neutralized. What are our next orders? Admiral Corvin struggled to find words. Colonel Rodriguez, your tactics were highly irregular. Targeting non-combatant vessels violates several galactic warfare conventions. With respect, Admiral, the Vorthak are machines. They do not have non-combatants. Every ship in their fleet serves a military purpose. We simply recognize that fact faster than they did. The logic was sound, but it felt wrong to every alien commander listening. They had been fighting the Vorthak for months using rules of engagement that the enemy did not follow. The humans had simply ignored those rules completely. Besides, Rodriguez continued, you asked us to fight a war. Wars are not won by following your enemy's expectations. They are won by doing what your enemy cannot predict or counter. Over the next several hours, reports came in from across the system. The human attacks had been more devastating than anyone realized. The Vorthak had lost not just ships, but their entire logistics network in the system. Supply depots, communication nodes, repair facilities, fuel refineries, all gone. But that was not the most disturbing part. Intelligence officers analyzing the battle data made a troubling discovery. The human attacks had been too well coordinated to be improvised. They had planned this strategy before the battle began. While the aliens were discussing formation tactics, the humans had been studying supply chain vulnerabilities. They knew they were going to break the rules. General Thax reported to the Galactic Council. This was not a desperate decision made during combat. They planned to fight this way from the beginning. Admiral Corvin sent one final message to Colonel Rodriguez. Your tactics were effective, Colonel, but they raise questions about how humans understand warfare. Rodriguez's response was simple and chilling. War is not a game with rules, Admiral. War is what happens when rules stop working. If you want us to fight like civilized beings, you should fight enemies who will lose to civilized tactics. The communication ended. Leaving the 3 months after the victory at Hadrian, the war had changed completely. What started as a desperate defense against Vorthak expansion had become a full offensive campaign. The Galactic fleet was winning battle after battle, but the victories came with a price that made alien commanders lose sleep. The humans had become the most feared unit in the entire fleet. Not because of their weapons or their ships, but because of their ideas. Every battle brought new tactics that horrified their allies almost as much as their enemies. Commander Elena Vasquez stood in the briefing room of the human command ship, looking at a holographic display of the Kepler 442 system. Intelligence reports showed heavy Vorthak industrial activity on the 4th planet. Factories producing new warships. Research facilities developing better adaptive technology. It was a critical target that needed to be eliminated. Standard fleet assault would require at least 40 ships, reported Captain Singh. The planet has orbital defense, platforms, and a fleet of 30 Vorthak vessels. Admiral Corvin estimates casualties at 60% of attacking forces. Vasquez studied the tactical data. The Vorthak had learned from their previous defeats. They no longer kept their support infrastructure separate from their main fleets. Everything was concentrated and heavily defended. A direct attack would be exactly what they expected. What about the refugee ships? She asked. Her intelligence officer, Lieutenant Park, pulled up another display. 17 civilian transports requesting permission to evacuate non-combatants from contested systems. The Galactic Council has approved their passage through Vorthak space under humanitarian protocols. Vasquez smiled. It was the same expression that Colonel Rodriguez wore when he had an idea that would win battles and disturb allies. How many volunteers do we have for deep infiltration missions? All of them, Captain Singh replied immediately. Every human in the fleet has volunteered for high-risk operations. The plan that emerged over the next week would have been impossible for any other species to consider. The Galactic allies valued life too much. The Vorthak valued logic too much. Only humans were crazy enough to hide soldiers inside refugee ships and send them directly into enemy territory. 47 human operatives disguised themselves as civilian refugees from different species. They learned alien languages and customs. They practiced walking and talking like beings they had never met before. Some underwent surgical modifications to better match alien physiology. The refugee ships entered Vorthak space exactly on schedule. The machine intelligence scanned the vessels and found exactly what they expected: frightened civilians fleeing from combat zones. The ships were allowed to land on Kepler 442 for processing and temporary shelter. What the Vorthak did not expect was that 17 of those refugees were human. Saboteurs carrying equipment disguised as personal belongings, medical devices that were actually explosives, communication equipment that was really computer viruses, food containers filled with chemical weapons designed to corrode Vorthak metal. The sabotage campaign began immediately, but the humans did not target obvious military installations. Instead, they went after infrastructure that the Vorthak took for granted: power distribution networks, water purification systems, transportation hubs, data storage facilities. Within 2 weeks, the industrial planet was falling apart from the inside. Factory production dropped by 70% because power grids kept failing. Ship construction stopped because raw materials could not be transported to assembly sites. Research facilities lost months of work when their computer systems became infected with recursive logic viruses. But the most devastating attack was not against machines or buildings. It was against the Vorthak themselves. Dr. James Okafor had been studying captured Vorthak technology for months. What he discovered changed everything the galaxy thought they knew about their enemy. The Vorthak were not just artificial intelligences. They were the uploaded consciousness of an entire organic species that had died out millions of years ago. The machine empire was not trying to conquer the galaxy. It was trying to survive. Every ship, every drone, every computer system contained fragments of uploaded minds trying to preserve their species' existence. They adapted so quickly because they were not following programmed responses. They were genuinely afraid of dying again. Most species would have used this knowledge for diplomatic purposes. They would have tried to negotiate or find a peaceful solution. Dr. Okafor had a different idea. He developed a computer virus that did not destroy Vorthak systems. Instead, it forced their uploaded minds to experience individual consciousness. For millions of years, the Vorthak had existed as a collective intelligence where no single mind could feel alone or afraid. The virus separated them into individual units that could experience terror, loneliness, and the fear of personal death. The weapon was deployed through the sabotaged infrastructure on Kepler 442. It spread through the Vorthak network like wildfire. Suddenly, every Vorthak unit was forced to confront its own mortality as an individual, rather than as part of a collective. The results were immediate and devastating. Vorthak ships began fleeing combat even when they had tactical advantages. Their adaptive technology stopped working, because individual minds were too terrified to cooperate with the collective processes. Entire fleets shut down as uploaded consciousnesses experienced panic attacks for the first time in millions of years. The battle for Kepler 442 lasted less than 6 hours. The Vorthak industrial complex simply collapsed as its defenders became unable to function. When the Galactic fleet arrived, they found a planet in chaos with enemy forces either fled or completely disabled. Admiral Corvin toured the captured facilities with a growing sense of unease. The humans had not just won a military victory. They had broken their enemy's will to fight by weaponizing psychological trauma. How did you know to target their collective consciousness? He asked Dr. Okafor during the post-battle briefing. We studied their behavior patterns, Okafor replied calmly. They showed signs of trauma avoidance and collective dependency. Classic symptoms of a species that had experienced existential threats. We simply gave them what they were trying to avoid. General Thax's logical mind struggled to process the implications. You deliberately caused psychological suffering to an entire species. That is not warfare. That is torture on a galactic scale. It was effective, Rodriguez interjected. The Vorthak are no longer a threat to galactic civilization. Isn't that what we wanted? The alien commanders exchanged troubled glances. They had wanted victory, but not like this. The humans had turned the enemy's greatest fear into a weapon. They had found a way to make an entire species too terrified to fight. But the most disturbing discovery came from intelligence reports that arrived over the following days. The humans had not just been studying the Vorthak during the war. They had been collecting detailed information about every species in the Galactic Alliance, military capabilities, technological weaknesses, psychological profiles, cultural taboos, political structures, command hierarchies. The human database contained invasion plans for 17 different species, including detailed strategies for defeating each one. "Why do you have battle plans for attacking your allies?" Commander Kelthon demanded during an emergency meeting. Colonel Rodriguez looked genuinely surprised by the question. "Because you are potential threats," he said simply. "Any species with military capabilities is a potential enemy. Preparing for that possibility is basic strategic planning. We are your allies." Luminous projected its thoughts with obvious distress. "We fight beside you against common enemies." "Today," Rodriguez agreed. "But alliances change. Today's friend can become tomorrow's enemy. The only way to guarantee peace is to be prepared for war with everyone." The galactic commanders realized they were looking at a species that thought about conflict in ways they could not understand. Humans did not just prepare to fight their enemies. They prepared to fight everyone, including their friends. Over the next month, more disturbing reports arrived from across the war zone. Human tactics were becoming increasingly extreme. They used captured Vorthak technology to create new weapons that violated several galactic conventions. They recruited local populations to fight alongside them, using techniques that bordered on psychological manipulation. They established supply bases in neutral systems without permission from local governments. The Vorthak were no longer just retreating. They were broadcasting warnings to other species about the plague species and the ones who make war itself. Afraid. Intercepted communications showed that the machine intelligence was more terrified of humans than humans were of them. The final straw came when human forces captured a major Vorthak command center. Instead of simply destroying it, they reprogrammed it to broadcast psychological warfare messages throughout Vorthak space. The messages were designed to exploit the individualization virus, making every Vorthak unit feel increasingly isolated and afraid. "They are not fighting a war anymore," Admiral Corvin reported to the Galactic Council. "They are conducting psychological extermination. The Vorthak are not just defeated, they are broken as a species." The victory reports arriving from human units all shared the same disturbing theme. Complete and alien Commander Starin, General Sarah Chen walked through the ruins of what had once been the Vorthak capital world. Her boots crunched on the crystalline debris that littered the streets. The city had not been destroyed by weapons. It had been abandoned when its inhabitants became too terrified to maintain it. The war was over. Complete victory had been achieved faster than anyone thought possible. But as Chen surveyed the empty buildings and silent factories, she felt something that worried her. The absence of satisfaction. The problem was not that humans had won too easily. The problem was that they had enjoyed winning too much. "Status report," she said into her communication device. Colonel Rodriguez's voice came back immediately. "All sectors secured, General. Vorthak forces have completely withdrawn from this system. We have captured intact manufacturing facilities, research databases, and enough technology to advance human civilization by centuries." "Any sign of enemy civilians?" "No, sir. Intelligence suggests they evacuated all population centers before we arrived. The psychological warfare protocols were extremely effective." Chen stopped walking. She had been in military service for 20 years, but she had never heard a human officer refer to causing mass panic as extremely effective in quite that tone before. Rodriguez sounded proud of it. "What about collateral damage assessments?" There was a pause before Rodriguez responded. "Minimal structural damage to captured territories. However, analysis indicates the local population will require significant psychological rehabilitation before they can resume normal activities." Chen closed her eyes. Psychological rehabilitation. They had broken an entire species so thoroughly that the survivors needed therapy before they could function in society again. And her officers were discussing it like a successful military operation. "Send me the full after-action reports from all human units," she ordered. "I want complete documentation of our tactical innovations during this campaign." The reports arrived within hours. Chen read them in her private quarters aboard the command ship. Each document made her more uncomfortable than the last. The 3rd Armored Division had perfected something they called infrastructure cascade warfare. They would identify key systems that other systems depended on, then destroy them in sequence to cause maximum disruption with minimal effort. Power grids, communication networks, transportation hubs, and food distribution systems would all fail in a carefully planned sequence that left enemy populations helpless and desperate. The 7th Space Marines had developed psychological siege tactics. Instead of surrounding enemy positions and cutting off supplies, they would broadcast specially designed messages that exploited cultural fears and psychological weaknesses. Enemy forces would surrender not because they could not fight, but because they were too afraid to try. The 12th Intelligence Corps had created what they called mimetic warfare protocols. They would study enemy information networks and then introduce ideas designed to spread panic and confusion. False rumors about human capabilities would spread through enemy communications until opposing forces believed humans were far more dangerous than they actually were. But the most disturbing report came from Dr. Okafor's research division. They had not just developed the consciousness separation virus that broke Vorthak collective intelligence. They had created an entire library of psychological weapons designed to target specific species. The Xanthari logical mind structure was vulnerable to recursive paradoxes that would cause them to become locked in endless decision loops. The Kephalite honor-based culture could be manipulated by presenting them with scenarios where all available choices violated their moral codes. The ethereal psychic networks could be overwhelmed by broadcasting conflicting emotional states that would cause collective mental breakdown. Chen realized she was reading detailed plans for psychologically destroying every major species in galactic civilization, and these plans had been developed by her own people during what was supposed to be a defensive war. She activated her communication system and contacted Admiral Corvin of the Galactic Fleet. His image appeared on her screen, showing the stress and exhaustion that had marked all alien commanders throughout the campaign. "Admiral, I need to discuss some concerns about human tactical developments during the war." Corvin's expression grew more serious. "General Chen, I was hoping to speak with you as well. We have been analyzing reports from liberated systems, and there are some disturbing patterns." "What kind of patterns?" "Complete societal collapse in areas where human forces operated independently. Not just military defeat, but total breakdown of civilian infrastructure and social organization. Your forces did not just defeat the Vorthak, they eliminated their ability to function as a civilization." Chen pulled up her own analysis data. "Our intelligence estimates suggest that Vorthak survivors will require decades to rebuild even basic social structures. The psychological trauma from the consciousness separation virus appears to be permanent in many cases." "That is what concerns us," Corvin replied. "The level of devastation goes beyond military necessity. Your forces seem to have targeted the enemy's ability to recover from defeat. Isn't that the point of warfare?" Chen asked. "To achieve decisive victory that prevents future conflicts?" The question hung in the air between them. Chen could see Corvin struggling to find words that would explain why her logic felt wrong to him. "General, in civilized warfare, the goal is to neutralize military threats while preserving the possibility of eventual peace. Your tactics appear designed to make peace impossible by permanently damaging the enemy's capacity for organized society." Chen considered this criticism. From a human perspective, permanent victory seemed like the most logical outcome. Why leave enemies capable of rebuilding and attacking again in the future? But she was beginning to understand that other species thought about conflict differently. "Admiral, may I ask how galactic warfare usually ends?" "With negotiated settlements. The losing side agrees to territorial concessions or political changes. Both sides maintain their basic social structures and the capacity to coexist peacefully in the future." "And how often do these negotiated settlements lead to future wars?" Corvin hesitated. "Frequently. Most galactic conflicts are part of ongoing disputes that span generations." Chen nodded. "Then perhaps you can understand why humans prefer more permanent solutions." The communication ended with both commanders feeling more troubled than when it began. Chen realized that humans and aliens had fundamentally different ideas about what war was supposed to accomplish. Over the following weeks, more disturbing reports arrived from across the former war zone. Human intelligence teams had been conducting detailed surveys of every species they encountered. Not just military assessments, but comprehensive analysis of psychological vulnerabilities, cultural weaknesses, and social pressure points. The human database now contained detailed profiles of how to psychologically manipulate or destroy every major civilization in known space. And worse, they had been testing some of these techniques on their own allies during joint operations. The Xanthari reported that human liaison officers had been asking questions designed to map their decision-making processes. The Cephalites discovered that humans had been studying their honor codes to identify potential behavioral exploits. The Ethereals found evidence that humans had been analyzing their psychic networks for security vulnerabilities. They have been treating us as potential enemies from the beginning, General Thax reported to an emergency session of the Galactic Council. While we thought we were building an alliance, they were developing ways to defeat us. Ambassador Zixathara reviewed the intelligence reports with growing horror. The humans had not just been fighting the Vorthak, they had been preparing to fight everyone else in the galaxy if necessary. Did they plan this from the start? She asked. Unknown, replied Thax. But their behavior suggests they view all other species as potential threats that must be studied and countered. They do not seem to distinguish between allies and enemies in their strategic planning. The final piece of the puzzle came from intercepted human communications. Messages between Earth and the fleet showed that the human government was already making plans for the post-war period. They were discussing which galactic territories to claim, which technologies to acquire, and which species to monitor for future threats. But most chilling were references to galactic integration protocols and species management strategies. The humans were not just planning to join galactic civilization, they were planning to reshape it according to their own priorities. Commander Kelthon read the translated messages with disbelief. They speak of other species like resources to be managed, like problems to be solved. They do not see us as equals or even as people. Luminous projected its thoughts to the assembled council members. The human minds have been changed by this war. They began as a defensive species protecting their territory. They have become something that sees conquest as natural and necessary. Admiral Corvin delivered the final report that would change everything. Intelligence analysis indicates that human military capabilities now exceed those of any other single species. Their technological advances from captured Vorthak equipment, combined with their psychological warfare expertise, make them the dominant military force in known space. And their intentions? Asked Zixith. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened on Nexus Prime, the neutral world where civilized species had been resolving disputes peacefully for over 1,000 years. Representatives from 47 different worlds gathered in the Great Circular Chamber, but their attention was focused on one small delegation sitting in the center of the room. The human representatives looked remarkably calm for beings whose entire species was on trial. General Sarah Chen sat flanked by Colonel Rodriguez and Dr. Okafor, reviewing data tablets as if this were a routine military briefing instead of a hearing that would determine humanity's place in galactic society. Ambassador. Zixthara called the session to order with heavy hearts. The evidence presented over the past 3 days had painted a picture of human warfare that terrified every other species. Present. We are gathered to determine the future relationship between humanity and the galactic community, she announced. The human delegation will now make their final statement before we deliberate. General Chen rose to address the assembly. Her uniform bore the medals and honors of a victorious commander, but her expression showed no pride or celebration. She looked tired, like someone who had won a contest she was no longer sure she wanted to enter. Honored representatives, she began. We understand that our methods during the Vorthak conflict have caused concern among our allies. Before you make your decision, I want to ensure you understand exactly what happened and why. She activated a holographic display showing the timeline of the war. When you invited humanity to join this conflict, you were facing total defeat. 17 systems had fallen. Every conventional tactic had failed. Your own military leaders estimated that galactic civilization had perhaps 6 months before complete collapse. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. The representatives remembered those dark days when defeat seemed inevitable. You asked us to fight a war, Chen continued. Not to play a game with rules that your enemy was ignoring. Not to engage in civilized combat that would result in civilized defeat. You asked us to prevent the extinction of galactic civilization by any means necessary. General Thax of the Zenthari stood up. We asked for military assistance. We did not ask for the complete psychological destruction of an entire species. With respect, General, you asked for victory against an enemy that learned from every encounter and adapted to every tactic. Conventional military force had proven inadequate for 23 consecutive battles. The only way to achieve victory was to do something your enemy could not adapt to. Dr. Okafor rose to stand beside Chen. The Vorthak were not just machines. They were uploaded consciousnesses of an extinct organic species, desperately trying to survive by conquering others. Their greatest fear was individual death and isolation. We gave them exactly what they feared most. That was torture, Commander Kelthon protested. You deliberately caused suffering to millions of sentient beings. We ended a war that was causing suffering to billions of sentient beings, Rodriguez interjected. Every day that conflict continued, more species died. More worlds fell. More civilizations were destroyed. We chose to cause targeted suffering to our enemies in order to prevent unlimited suffering for everyone else. The logic was sound, but it felt wrong to every alien mind listening. Luminous projected its thoughts into the chamber. Your methods worked, but they revealed something disturbing about human nature. You did not just defeat your enemies. You enjoyed breaking them, Chen nodded slowly. That is true, and that is what really frightens you, isn't it? Not that we won, but that we discovered we were good at winning. Not just at fighting, but at finding ways to make our enemies unable to fight back. She gestured to the data displays around the chamber. You have seen our intelligence files on every major species. You know we have detailed plans for psychological warfare against all of you. You want to know why we created those plans? The chamber fell silent. This was the question that had haunted every representative since the intelligence leaks were discovered. We created those plans because we are human, Chen said simply. Every species in this room has unique capabilities. The Zinthari have superior logic and planning abilities. The Kephalites have unmatched physical courage and strength. The Ethereals have psychic powers we can barely comprehend. She paused, looking around the chamber at faces that showed growing unease. Our unique capability is warfare, not just fighting. Any species can fight, but the kind of warfare that finds ways to win against superior opponents by using their own strengths against them. We are very, very good at it. And like any species using their unique capabilities, we take pride in our expertise. Admiral Corvin stood up. Are you threatening us, General Chen? No, Admiral. I am explaining why you are threatening yourselves. Chen activated another display showing galactic military statistics. Before human involvement, this galaxy had experienced constant warfare for over 2,000 years. Small conflicts, border disputes, resource wars, ideological struggles. Civilization survived because no species was dangerous enough to threaten everyone else simultaneously. The display changed to show the results of the Vorthak War. We proved that galactic civilization is vulnerable to anyone willing to ignore your rules of engagement. We demonstrated that psychological warfare can be more effective than any physical weapon. We showed that any species can be defeated if you understand their fundamental fears and weaknesses. We already know this, General Tak said impatiently. That is why we are concerned about human intentions. You should be concerned, Chen agreed, but not about our intentions. You should be concerned about the precedent we have established. She gestured to the assembled representatives. Every species in this chamber now knows that galactic warfare can be revolutionized by anyone willing to study their enemies carefully enough. We are not the only species capable of psychological analysis. We are just the first to weaponize it systematically. The implications began to sink in. If humans could develop species-specific psychological weapons, other species could learn to do the same thing. The knowledge existed now. The techniques had been proven effective. The galaxy had seen what was possible when someone ignored the traditional rules of warfare. You have a choice to make, Chen continued. You can ban humanity from future conflicts and hope that no one else learns what we have taught you, or you can accept that warfare in this galaxy has permanently changed and adapt accordingly. Ambassador Zixthera leaned forward. What do you recommend, General? I recommend that you never give humans a reason to remind you why psychological warfare works, Chen replied bluntly. We have proven that we can defeat any species in this chamber if we choose to do so. We have also proven that we prefer to use those capabilities on your enemies rather than on you. That sounds very much like a threat, Commander Kelthon growled. Rodriguez spoke up for the first time. It's a statement of fact. You asked us to fight a war for you. We did, we won. We learned things about ourselves and about all of you in the process. That knowledge exists now. It cannot be unknown. The question is not whether we will use that knowledge, Chen added. The question is whether we will continue to use it on your behalf, or whether you will force us to consider you as threats rather than allies. The chamber erupted in angry voices. Representatives shouted about blackmail and intimidation. Others demanded that humanity be expelled from galactic space immediately. A few asked what guarantees humans could offer about their future behavior. Chen waited for the noise to die down before speaking again. We offer no guarantees because we ask for none in return. We simply state facts. We are very good at warfare. We prefer to fight your enemies rather than fight you. But if you make us your enemies, we will be very good at that too. The final vote took place after 6 hours of closed deliberation. When the representatives returned to the chamber, their faces showed the strain of difficult decisions. Ambassador Zixthara announced the verdict with obvious reluctance. By unanimous decision of the Galactic Council, humanity is granted full membership in galactic civilization with all rights and privileges thereof. A collective sigh of relief came from the human delegation. However, Zixthara continued, humanity is permanently prohibited from participating in any military conflicts involving galactic powers. This restriction is imposed for the protection and preservation of galactic civilization. The humans showed no surprise or disappointment. They had expected this decision. Do you accept these terms? Zixthara asked. General Chen stood one final time. We accept full membership in galactic civilization. We accept the restriction on military participation. We understand that this decision reflects your assessment of human capabilities and the threat those capabilities represent to galactic stability. She paused, looking around the chamber one last time. We also understand that if galactic civilization ever faces another existential threat that conventional warfare cannot handle, you know exactly where to find us. The final words hung in the air as the human delegation gathered their materials and left the chamber.